So we don't have to start yet. Just getting the recording going. I wish there's a way to get a bit taller. Let's see if I can lower the chair.
I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good. I would call her. I wish I had a rabbit in a hat with the bat and a 6'4" Impala.
It's beautiful. Also ready to get this party started?
Yes, I am.
What episode are we on? Are we on 15 or 14? We actually might be on 16. I think
Uh,
about it.
so I think we're on
15?
15.
Okay. Once you get past the up to the double digit numbers, I stop being able to count. Like I can do like the 7, 8, 9 pretty well. Once you get like 10
Mike,
or higher, it's tough.
I can't count. Like, I don't know how to break this to you, man. I just can't count.
That's
People
fair.
will be like, "You're hitting on threes," and I'll roll my dice and I'll just stare at them. I won't know what to do, and I'll just start looking around. I do that learned behavior thing that like horses do, where people thought
Yeah,
they had learned to count because there would be like, "Oh, this horse can count to three," and it would
makes
like
sense. Yeah.
hit its hoof on the ground, and then once
Yeah,
it
yeah.
got to the third time, everyone would be like, and then it would stop. Like the horse learned where to stop. It didn't actually learn to count. So that's me with
Yeah.
40K dice. I like reach my hand over the dice to pick it up and I check my opponent's reaction. If they're like, then I don't. But if they're like, oh, then
Oh
I
yeah.
do.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's how I measure and count dice.
Yeah.
So
I
uh
just keep picking up hit rolls until they tell me to stop. So
what's hit rolls? I've been playing like a lot of like flamers recently, whether it's warp flamers, chaos demon flamers. I don't roll to hit,
the
okay?
flamer, the
Rolling to
random
hits is
flamer,
made
and the
up.
traitor guard squad, all sorts of good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, I don't roll to hit. Rolling to hits for nerds.
Well, on that note, welcome everyone to our very special 16th episode of Warped Wednesday. I'm your host, Mike Pestilence, here with my good, beautiful, handsome friend, Wallace O'Donnell. Wallace, my
That's
friend,
me.
how are you doing today?
Oh wow. I'm having a great day. It's a great day. I'm
Great days. So
exhausted.
we're thriving, not surviving.
Yeah, we're thriving, but I am physically exhausted. Actually,
Sure.
not displayed here is that I have a lot of sawdust on my pants. Um,
We'll take your
I
word for that.
I swear it's sawdust. Um, so I was setting up the I guess this is the big announcement in a way.
Oh, drum roll. Get excited, everyone.
um I'm making a Warhammer studio. So
Dun, 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 dun. Hell yeah. Super
woo.
hyped.
So as the owner to the delightful gaming store Tables and Towers, I have put in an undertaking in the last few weeks to set up a professional recording studio
Mm-hmm.
for tabletop content, so like 40K and other games. And I
Age of
don't
Sigmar,
know a
hopefully.
lick.
Amazing game.
Yeah, Age of Sigmar
Cool.
as well. And I don't know a lick about how to do that. That's not my background.
Sure.
So I've kind of been outsourcing help here and there. Huge shout out
Yeah.
to one of our local players, Paul, who came in and he has a lot of studio experience. He was helping me with knowing what to buy, where to set it up. And also a
Awesome.
big
Big
shout
shout
out
out to
to
Paul.
yeah, big shout out to Paul and big shout out to Joe from More Games Live. Joe is a friend of Tables and Towers.
Oh, Joe's a
And
legend.
he's a
Absolute legend,
legend.
man.
He's a legend. I love Joe. So he actually helped me with knowing what equipment to purchase and where to set it up. So when I say this is going to be a nice studio, I mean this is going to be one of the nicest studios in the hobby. Now whether or not I know how to use that or if I can make good content with that,
Yeah.
we'll find out. We'll find out
I'm very
together.
optimistic. I think you have a natural skill for it. And I've seen some early pictures of the studio and wow, like I'm not a video expert. You're mainly the video guy, I'm the writing guy. But from what I've seen, wow, it looks impressive. I'm also super hyped to see what comes out of that.
I think
And,
it'll be awesome.
and we all know at some point I'm gonna come over to that East Coast and you know damn well you and I are gonna record some battle reports together.
Yeah, I've got a
Always
I've got
chaos
a
and
I've got a
chaos action
big
out there.
I've got a big reserved spot for you, Mike, whenever you want to come by or play some games. So I have some
Man,
friends
I
too on
can't
the
wait.
East Coast that are going to
Yeah.
probably be guest stars. So Warhammer Studio, very excited about that. Expect
And
that in the coming
on that
months.
note, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, first of all, welcome. We love you. You're amazing. Second, if you're
Mwah.
not subscribed, the video content, like seriously, like we're just at the beginning of the journey. It's going to get so much better from here, especially with this amazing new studio Walls has. Why don't we go ahead somewhere down there? I'm not good at this stuff. Somewhere down there, there's a subscribe button.
Yeah,
Like button if you're feeling generous, but I'm not going to ask for that much. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. and you'll be ready for the best 40K content out there.
I also like to say turn on the bell as well because it rhymes, and I like me a little bit of rhymes. If I were to say I was, yeah. If I were to say I was like any character in 40K, it would be Sloppity Bile Piper. That's just one of the best models that has ever been made for Age of Sigmar Warhammer. It's a beautiful model. It's ugly, but it's beautiful, and it's really funny. And he's all about like, ooh, he's running around, he's joking, laughing, having a good time. Everyone else is like, we tolerate you, and that's how I am. So,
that's cool. No, super exciting, Wallace. Can't wait to see what comes out of the Warhammer Studios. And I know you're gonna have some other great guests. I'm not gonna spoil anything. There's gonna be plenty of time for that later. We've got some very nice guests lined up for the future. Cool. Super happy for you, buddy.
Tell me about this Mike character I've been hearing about. How's he doing?
Mike character. Well, he's actually. I apologize to everyone. I'm a little bit out of breath because I just played tennis with my partner for like the first time in 10 or so months, easily.
10 or so months. It's like 10 is 10.
Tennis,
exactly. Yeah. Tennis months.
I had to wait. Like, she wanted to play last month, and I was like, no, sorry, we can't play 9 months later. It has to be 10. Here's the thing people don't expect. And I totally forgot this. Like, it just feels like a small court. It's like a tiny court compared to like going running or something. But because you're constantly running back and forth, especially because just between the two of us and everyone listening, I have to do a lot of running to hit some very far away hit balls. Get them back, do some retrieving. Man, you run out of breath really quickly. I'm not the most in shape person, not the least in shape person ever. But wow, I was running out of breath quickly.
So do you have like one of those sweatbands that they wear with like the really like short shorts?
Of course,
they have for tennis
the really
players?
Short shorts, the uncomfortably short shorts from like the 70s and 80s. Absolutely.
Yes. It just plays 80s music wherever you go.
Top, and I just like jump like this the whole time to get my cardio going. But yeah. Let's see. On a serious note, there was one topic I wanted to talk about, which has been the source of a lot of controversy in 40K lately. And I don't want to dwell on it. I don't want to dogpile on it, but it's been on my mind. I think it's important to talk about. I'm not going to name names because that's not the point here. Recently, sometime this week, there was a 40K content creator who did a podcast with some other guests. Again, I'm not going to name names here, not trying to dogpile or like direct anyone to attack them. It is what it is now. Is in the course of this video, they made a series of jokes and references talking about their toy soldiers, using references to sexual assault. And there were some pretty vulgar ones in there. I'm not going to really get into that. And it was a little disheartening because I thought we kind of grew past that, when we were no longer 14 or so. But I was a little bit heartened by the community's reaction on the whole. Was really people took a pretty firm stance against that, which, again, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to dogpile on these people. I'm not even going to name any names. But I think we all should use that as a learning experience to be, at the end of the day, we're playing with toy soldiers. So if you're, people, using like very graphic sexual assault metaphors to describe what's happening to toy soldiers or things like that. I think we can all use this as a learning experience in the community. Just be like, hey, people have gone through a lot of different experiences. You never know who's listening. So probably best to err on the side of just being a little bit more compassionate and kind of, think a little bit more. We're going to use loaded language like that. Again, not trying to dogpile. It is what it is now, but let's all learn kind of as a community and get stronger from this. Off the soapbox, Wallace, let's go ahead and dive into a very abridged, very short game of whose relic is it anyway before we dive into our main topic.
Whose relic is it anyway? Well, let me ask you that, Mike. Do you have a relic prepared?
Oh, it's Nurgle's relic this week because we're going deep into the Death Guard Codex. I say deep as there's really not that many relics in here. Shout out to their early 9th edition book.
Yes, I know like 3 of them, so we'll see if it lands on my side of the dartboard.
Hopefully I get this. Let's see here. I don't really feel like playing much of this game this week, so I'll give you a very easy one.
Okay.
Quote, buried in the Blightspawn's torso, these vats emit an incredibly foul odor. What relic am I, Wolves?
Plague Skulls of Golgotha.
No, it's the Fulgaris helm. And also,
dang.
It's
the revolting stench vats.
That was too easy.
That was a little too easy. It's one of the best relics in the game, though. If you could take that relic in most other codexes, the Stonk would go way up.
Well, I think the time for games is over. I think it's time to get serious. Do you want to tell what this week's topic is going to be?
Yeah, today's topic of the week is going to be Mike telling me what the topic is. I forgot.
The topic of this week is how to deal with difficult opponents. Because
Oh,
let's be honest, we've all been there before. We
that's
get to
true.
the table, you think the game is going to start well, or maybe even sometimes you get to the table, you immediately can tell it's going to, be a headbutting experience. But you get to the table, and the game starts, and they get a little salty about something, and they start getting brisk, they start raising their voice, they start getting upset, they start challenging you on every little thing. There's a lot of forms this can take, but we've all had a difficult opponent before. So I wanted to kind of use this chance to, you and I will each kind of share some stories of times we've dealt with difficult opponents, um, talk about how we handled that, but also talk about in hindsight ways we could have handled that better. Because again, sometimes it's difficult, even when someone's being troublesome, you still can be, as nice as you can to them, or help them kind of, calm down, or kind of rejoin you enjoying the experience together. So yeah, we'll talk about, some experiences, what we learned, and what we can do better in the future. And hopefully we can all kind of learn a little bit about how to deal with some of these difficult opponents out there.
So I have a good example that was pretty recent. I was playing against
Yeah,
an
I'd love to hear
opponent.
this.
They were a Thousand Suns player, started off really friendly, started off really happy and positive. I noticed as the game went on, they were getting frustrated. They were getting frustrated because they
Yeah,
knew they were losing. At that point, I had a pretty significant advantage in terms of how the mission was playing out.
sure.
And so when they started to get frustrated, they started to behave poorly at the
Tense.
table. You
Yeah,
know, they make like little jabbing comments a little bit.
yeah,
They
I know
start
exactly what you mean.
and they start like maybe I'm not going to say directly to them because it's not clear
Yeah,
that they're fudging their dice rolls, but they're like
yeah,
rolling in ways you can't see them and stuff like that. Just
never a good
behavior that
sign.
seems sus. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And they weren't doing that earlier. Like earlier, they're rolling in a dice
yeah,
box in
yeah.
front of you or whatever. When I start to catch on to that, what I do is I go from friendly, good, we're having a nice time mode to evaluating my position and then evaluating what I need to do, one, to win the game, and two, to, if possible, salvage the experience.
Sure.
So to win, like in those situations, especially if somebody's being like unreasonable, like they're not responding to you or reminding them to do things
Sure.
correctly, then if somebody's being very unreasonable, you need to call a judge. So I've
Yes.
had plenty of examples of this in the past where I'm playing in a tournament game. Somebody does something that's like a little bit untoward. I say,
Mhm.
hey, just wanted to point this out. I think that that happened this way. Would you mind just showing me that in the future? It happens a lot with movement, especially people over moving their models.
Oh yeah.
Um,
There's
and
a lot of 6-inch moving models that move 8 inches every time they have to move.
right,
We've all
especially when
seen it.
they
Yeah.
really need them to.
Oh
So
yeah.
you just like kind of like are reinforcing the idea, hey, can you be a little bit more precise with your measurements? Then they do it again. I usually, and this is probably too much, give them kind of a three strike system. And the second time they do it, say, hey, just as a reminder, we had talked about this. Just be a little bit careful so that I can see it and confirm it. If you want me to move that to my
Yeah.
clock when you're showing it to me, that's fine. The third time it happens, I call a judge. And the
Okay.
reason I do that is because I have been cheated in pretty significant ways in the past by opponents that were just not playing by the same rules as me. And you don't want them to rob you of your win because of their attitude and their behavior. So at that
Sure.
point, you call a judge. Now, a lot of times the situation is salvageable, especially if you start joking with them, like if they're open or
Humor is a great
receptive
way
to
to
it.
break down barriers.
Humor will break down barriers a lot of the time, and a lot of the time I will try that and see how receptive they are to it. Some people that will coax them back out of the I need to win mentality back to
Yeah.
like, okay, like they're getting back into the humanizing portion. You're rehumanizing yourself to your opponent. um Having some good self-deprecating jokes is usually good, or if like something crazy happened at the table, like you had like them like roll really bad on their dice or whatever, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, you can always be like, yeah, man, that just sucks, like I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. That's very
Those are
true.
those kinds of comments, like a little bit of humor or
Yeah.
empathizing comments, can help salvage the experience. So in that example with that Thousand Suns player, he
Yeah.
started being kind of like, I don't know, a little bit aggressive, and he started being less clear with how he was moving his models, how he was adjusting his CP, stuff like that, like little
Yeah. Yeah.
edge case stuff that you would start doing if you're really like trying to find a win when it's not, like happening for you, like stuff that like if
Yeah.
you're being a little bit shady, you would do.
It's
Um,
unfortunate, but I've definitely seen that. Yeah.
but I also identified immediately, like, this guy at the moment sees winning as the biggest value here. And so how can I salvage this experience for both of us? So I start joking with him, but I'm very firm with the rules stuff. Like if he's rolling by a building, I'm standing there so I can catch it. If he rolls something before he picks it up out of the tray, I ask if I can see it, that kind of thing. I start being a little bit more firm with that. That one protects my win because I ultimately want to get my win. I'm not going to let his behavior ruin that for me, especially in a tournament setting. If it's casual, like what are we doing here? If it's casual and somebody's being bad, like just stop for a second,
Just
take
go
a
home, man.
moment,
It's not
take a
worth it.
breath,
You can
take
do
a
million more
breath.
fun things. Yeah.
I even like to do it a little bit on the nose. I'm like, I sometimes in casual games I'll stop it, like, I see you're getting a little bit frustrated here. Is that the case? Is there anything I'm doing wrong? That
Yeah.
kind of thing. That kind of direct conversation really helps, especially in casual
Oh,
environments.
humans love telling each other what they're doing wrong. One of our favorite hobbies.
Yes. Whereas in a tournament, that's not the appropriate time to do
Yeah.
that, to be honest with you. So in a tournament, you want to try to salvage it if you can, but it's definitely your second priority. And so when you're trying to salvage it, try to create fun experiences. If you know you've already won a certain situation, you don't have to drive the dagger deeper. You don't have to like truly make them feel like it was an unfun game. As an example, I was playing a game once where it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. But we both were talking about
When you
at the
say
beginning
foregone
of the
conclusion,
game.
what do you mean? Was it like become the game or like from the list or kind of experience?
From the
Okay.
points, like they couldn't get caught back up. They were
Okay,
very
so like halfway
dejected
through the
about it.
game, like partially the game, you realized there was like impossible for them to catch up.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, they had
sure,
made some
sure,
mistakes. They lost too much early. But we talked about at the beginning how
sure.
cool it would be to see like their Flyrant and Be'lakor duke it out. And this was like on Tyranid Codex release. So what I did right at the end, I'm like, you know what? Let's
Yeah,
have a fight. Let's put them in the middle and we'll see what happens. And so I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm going to let you get the charge. So they get to go first. And we have a little Be'lakor versus Flyrant battle. And it was a
Oh,
lot of
that's
fun.
amazing.
It was
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
yeah.
Be'lakor ended up suplexing them, but we were like playing fun music or playing
Way to go, Bellacore.
WWE.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was like, yeah, a wrestling match.
yeah,
That salvaged the game. We had a good time. We both left with a positive experience. I got my win. I didn't lose any points by doing what I did. You don't always have the opportunity to do that.
yeah.
But
Very true.
my opinion is the first thing you got to do is you got to protect your win. Don't let them cheat you out of
Mhm.
that. The second thing you got
Yeah,
to do is you got to be firm about the rules of the game in the
you do.
accurate way that
You have
they're
to be
played.
firm.
And then the third thing you can do is you can try to salvage the game by finding an inroad to rehumanize yourself to your opponent. You
Yeah,
want to draw their focus away from, this is competitive, I have to, and back to, hey, this is a social
yeah,
contract here. We're both here to have fun. That's not always doable, but you want to
yeah,
try. So that's
yeah.
my opinion.
I could not agree with more. Those are all really good points, and I like that you were able to turn that the Tyrannus game special, turn that into kind of a memorable moment for both of you from what could have been a
And,
difficult
and,
experience.
and to the credit of the Suns player, he ended up getting back into the like, okay, this is okay. It's fine if I
Yeah,
lose. I
credit to them
accept
too.
this.
Yeah,
Yes. What could I have done better? By the end of the game, we were back in like good terms. And he apologized for getting dicey during the game.
yeah. Oh,
So
that's everyone loves a happy ending.
yeah. So
Trying to think. I know I've definitely got some stories that fit the bill. Let's see here. I can definitely remember one was let's see here. There's a few that kind of fit the bill. Um, I think, well, in general, a common theme is empathy is just a good ability. One of the
yes.
best, inbuilt traits humans generally come with. Um, and oftentimes when you're, kind of in a game where your dice are abandoning you, or like everything's going wrong, and again, maybe some of that's your decision making, but at the time it just feels like everything's collapsing on you, and we've all been there. Um, and we've also played opponents for whom that's happening, where again they have a bunch of warp charge 7 powers, they have like 3 important 7s, and they roll 3 6s. We've all been there. I think it's really good to kind of acknowledge what's going on rather than gloating. So for example, um, if your opponent's rolling like absolute dog whatever words YouTube allows to say up, um, I think it's important to acknowledge that. And you don't have to joke about it. You don't want to like rub it in their face or seem gleeful, but just being like, damn, man, that's like third 7 in a row that failed. I don't know what's going on here or something. Just make some sort of comment that lets them know they're not alone in feeling like everything's going against them. You're seeing that too. You're there with them. You kind of know it's a little bit unfair from a dice perspective. I think that's definitely a big one.
Mhm.
Use a little empathy. But another one is I think what you talked about calling the judge. I think that's really important. Where there was a game. I'm trying to be vague here because I don't want to. Because I've played
You don't want
many.
to oust this particular player,
Also, here's so I'll say it like this: they played one of my personal favorite armies, which means I knew their rules very well. So when they tried to make a bunch of just a absolute avalanche of rules mistakes in their favor, like literally like 15 different things all in their favor, some of them like egregiously so, where there's no way it could have been a mistake. Um, Again, I've played a lot of people for whom I'm familiar with army. I enjoy it. 99% of them are fantastic. There's one opponent that stands out at a major event I went to. Um,
I know
and
what
what I
this
did was
one
straight
is.
up after like the sixth thing, I said, "Hey, straight up." I told him what was happening. He was on a really good run with his army. I came in here and I was clobbering his army early. I'm not saying that as like a point of pride. It was just the way the game was going. I was getting a little bit of a lot of momentum early. And I straight up told him, I was like, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. You've made now 6 or 7 rules mistakes in your favor. I know this army extremely well. If we see any more rules mistakes, I think we should have a judge here to check in and see how this game is going, or kind of discuss some of these rule mistakes with the judge. Um, I said straight up, I don't know what's going on, man, but I can tell you, like, you came here in a rush, you're getting a little bit frustrated. It happens. Let's make sure we have a clean game from here on out. So rather than like beat them down over it, kind of say like, hey, here's what's happening. But like, I get it, man. Let's just have a clean game from this point forward. Kind of offer them that, hey, we don't have to go down this path. Let's just go down this path together, like this fun, friendly game. Because if it seems like you're just kind of boxing them in and like rubbing in their face, well, then they're going to kind of get very defensive. If you're like, hey, man, like, I've seen these mistakes. Not saying I didn't use the word cheat or anything. I said I've seen a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of frustration building. Let's make sure we have a clean game from here on out. So it's kind of both that, the carrot of, hey, let's have a friendly game, but also that, by the way, man, if I see any more of this going on, we're going to judge this table. Um, Fun fact, we had a great, clean, rules error-free game the rest of the way. So hats off to my opponent for,
They knew what they were doing.
they 100% knew what they were doing.
Is it so most of the time when people I will say this, I
Yeah.
think there's less cheaters in the community than people think there are. There is some like
Absolutely.
legitimate like people that make mistakes.
Absolutely. I'd say
Anyone that's like a
less than 10%
serious,
for sure.
right, yeah, anyone that's a serious cheater,
Yeah.
they know what they're doing, and
Yeah.
as soon as you call them on it, they will immediately stop, or they
Yeah.
will get in trouble, and they know that they'll get in trouble, and then
Yeah.
they'll all of a sudden
Yeah.
know all their rules, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
so be direct with a
Yeah.
person. I think that's super important. That statement I made about in casual games be very direct. You don't necessarily need to do it in the
Exactly.
tournament.
Yeah.
I want to half walk that back, and that sometimes it's important to be very direct, just even if it's uncomfortable. The judge is there to help you if you're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
comfortable doing that yourself. But you just be direct with people. If you're like, hey
Yeah.
man, come on. All
Yeah.
right, come on.
So I will say, I talked to a judge afterwards. I was like, hey, I played this person. They made like XYZ big mistakes. I list off a few big ones. I was like, you probably should check in on the next game because I told him about these. I fully explained why that doesn't work. I think he knows exactly why. So double check. It'll be obvious from the board state if he's doing that thing. So I don't know what happened. I didn't check in the rest of the event because here's the thing: it's a big event. You're so busy hanging out with friends. The last thing you want to do is police some former opponent. Because here's the thing: like, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I hope he had a great rest of the event. I'll never know what happened, and I'm at peace with that. Other bad games are. I don't think I've had any bad games where the opponent was winning. Funny enough, I can't think of any.
I have, but
You have.
it was I have.
I would love to hear this story.
Some players' play style is very much like don't give you an inch is how they personally treat the game. And what I have found is there are some
Almost
people
all
that
former Magic players. Just saying, we can
yeah.
move on. I just had to throw that out there. Move on.
So what they'll do is they will they'll ask to go back a lot on decisions
Sure.
they make, and then if you ask to do it, they'll say you cannot. And I've had that experience before at a competitive game where they made a ton of mistakes that I always let them go back on, even literally being like going to the shooting phase and then moving a unit back. And this was when I was relatively new, so I didn't know too much better. I didn't have a lot of experience yet.
Yeah.
And then I came and I did just a simple oh, I forgot to put this unit here and then to say this one did the banner, and it was like I had gone to the shooting phase. Okay, so I shot with one of my units. That's something most people let you go back on because it didn't actually change anything in the game realistically, and they're just like no and no, and I'm like,
well, so again, that does not have a wouldn't want to play that person, but at the same time, I
you
don't
should
know
talk
if
about it beforehand.
you should. You should.
Yeah.
Or the first time I give a take back, I'm always gonna say like you would let me do the same thing, right? And again, they could lie. Here's the thing: like, who's really lying? Like, it's really like
I let them have it. For the thing that bothered me was that I let them have so much first, and then it came to me, and then I was just like, oh, I guess I lose.
Yeah. Well, let's see here. Other bad games are, I think it's also important if you're having a bad game to, again, I don't want to blame the person being on the receiving end of the behavior, but I think it's worth stepping back and just seeing if you have contributed in some way.
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes you're just dealing with a real lemon of a person and they're just going to be in their own little angry world or whatever. But often there is something you've, again, well, not 100% of the blame, maybe even like 5-10% of the blame is on you. And you can still focus on that. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, you control yourself. And that's the only person you control at the table. You control your actions, what you say, your tone and stuff. You don't control theirs. You can influence it maybe, but you don't control that. So I think it's important to, I had a really difficult game with the Space Wolves player once. And again, I don't think he was a bad guy, but he was getting, I still can understand where like some anger was coming for some pretty simple interactions, or like disagreements I've literally never had an opponent before or after disagree on. And I realized that, hey, I think this opponent is being difficult, but at the same time, we talked before the event. Both him and I came on like almost literally no sleep at all. Like he had just flown in before, and I had stayed up really late the night before and like couldn't fall asleep or whatever. I don't remember the exact details, but I came and basically got like a 30-minute nap after staying up till like 5 or 6 a.m. the next morning. So I basically was like, hey, I'm gonna be man, we're having a difficult game. I straight up said to him at the end, like, was there something I did that like made the situation worse? Or like what was I doing that bothered you? And he gave me like 4 or 5 pieces of feedback. I think four of the 5 were complete nonsense, just a little bit of salt. But one I was like, you know what, that's a fair point. Like I do see how that comment rubbed you the wrong way. So again, it doesn't mean, hey, like it's your fault, but I think at the end of the day, control what you can control. You can control yourself, and it's always worth considering, hey, did I have some part in this? And again, sometimes the answer is no, but it's almost never true that you had 0% in causing a bad game.
Yeah. I mean, the worst game I ever had, it was against some guy whose name was like Bike from Glorphammer, let's say.
Bike from
And
Glorphammer was
Bike from Glorphammer.
did his name rhyme with this?
And I'm over here and I'm trying to play my Disciples of
So this is like the
Bellicor
most
Demon.
college drink out there. I don't know why I still drink these, but they're like my guilty pleasure. Anyway, we
Oh,
can
Mike's. Yeah.
Mike drinking the Mike's. This has
Mike's
never stopped being funny to me. It's been like 2 decades now. Anyway, keep going.
So I was playing against this guy's like Bike from Glorphammer or whatever, and I'm playing Disciples of Bellicor with my 8th edition codex.
Disciples of Bellicor.
This Bike guy is playing Emperor's Children from the new release book.
Who would possibly play Emperor's Children? What kind of monster would play such a
and I was like, hey, we're friends. Maybe we should shoot a little battle report together. And then he just horribly abuses me in the game, just like gives me like a 20-70 score, just absolutely embarrasses my entire army, and then I have to completely go to ground, back to the board, and have to refigure out my whole list. Just well, he was nice the whole time, but I mean, underneath the smiles, I could tell that it was all just
viciousness. I will say I played a similar game against an opponent called Aulus O'Donnell or something. I don't remember his exact name. Anyway, I was running Emperor's Children. He was running, I think, Disciples of Bellicor, I think.
Yeah, sounds right. Like
and as he was packing up the minis at the end, he knocked my Chaos Spawn off the table, and it fell onto the stone floor and straight up shattered into like 6 pieces.
I didn't even knock it off the table. Even better.
He claims it was an accident. Oh, hold on. What happened here, Wolves?
It was even better. It wasn't knocked off the table. We put it on a toy train. And the toy train had this button to click to start it. And this guy, Ballas or whatever, he hit the click to start it on the toy train, and it literally drove the Chaos Spawn off the table.
It really pushed it like a bulldozer. To this day, he claims it was an accident. But I don't trust this Aulus O'Donnell. I'm certain he maliciously dashed my Chaos Spawn on the ground. He was so salty he lost with his Disciples of Bellicor.
And we were playing with like some Playmobil blocks back then, man. We did not.
Listen, man, we're not playing like a studio or game store. Like your search for terrain gets really tough. You're pulling books off the shelves. You're pulling plastic cups to use as hills or whatever. It gets rough out here in the streets, in the kitchen table streets. Okay, we'll never judge anyone's terrain.
Pushing around a empty can of San Pellegrino as my Contemptor Dreadnought, like this is some true floor hammer energy. Well, it's been a
note talking about the highs and the lows and the dark lows of competitive 40K. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. And drop us in the comments below. I want to hear about your bad games, your difficult opponents, and how that ended up.
And if you don't have any, drop a W. Let's go.
Drop a W. If you don't have any difficult opponents, guess what? Go out there and be the difficult opponent to make stories for other people so they can go in the comments below. Okay? We've given you many examples of how to be a difficult opponent, so I believe in you. You can do this. All right. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week on the following episode of Warped Wednesday.